And welcome everyone to Rock M Radio. This is a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. I am your host, Sam Snelling. We're here to talk all about Missouri basketball Tigers. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see to my right, your right, Matt's Hugh J. Harris. Matt, how are things in Indianapolis?
Oh, about to get very cold and very snowy. But otherwise, it's fine. I may or may not be driving west to go watch high school basketball this weekend, so I'm very interested in what road conditions look like in the next couple of days.
Yes. And we haven't podcasted since before Illinois. Not to bring a big downer to the podcast, but like right before Christmas, we lost one of the dogs. I wrote about it on Blue Sky for anybody who is skeeting over there on Blue Sky. You can look it up. But Bishop died kind of suddenly. He's been a dog that we've seen kind of enter into at times. So we're really gonna miss that guy. And so that on top of the holidays, we just really had a hard time kind of matching up and finding a time to record.
Yeah.
But now we're post. It is 2025, January 2nd. We are live for Rocket Plus subscribers. And a little fun thing for anybody that listen. We are currently not paywalling Rock M Plus, the front page. Like, you still need a password to get to the forums. And it's just tweeting stuff out, not tweeting, skeeting on Blue Sky. So if you follow the Rock M Plus account on Blue Sky, that's what they call it, skeeting. I think it's kind of funny. But if you follow the Rock M Plus account on Blue Sky, you'll get like the auto post stuff, and if you see something that's about podcasting in a live show, you can join, even if you're not a subscriber. But if you are a subscriber, you definitely have the link to check things out. So what we're going to try to accomplish here, and do so in under an hour, like we always do, is kind of recap the non-con. We had some sporadic recording for the non-conference. So we'll kind of recap everything, sort of give some general impressions. Matt and I will take a look at Missouri's forthcoming week of basketball and kind of where things stand. So with that said, Happy New Year, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy Kwanzaa.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yeah, all those landed on the 25th this year, which is unusual. So that's
Get it?
So 2025, Missouri finished their non-conference slate with a win over Alabama State. It got chunky at times and wasn't always the prettiest, but they did what they needed to do. They did not drop any of their bye games. 11-2. They did get one win. We were kind of hoping that they could sneak out away and get two of their quad. They had 3 quad one opportunities in the non-conference schedule. We were kind of hoping that they would be able to get 2 of them. They got one. Dropped a really tight back and forth game against Illinois. Illinois looks legit. Would not surprise me if they won the Big Ten. I think that's a loss that will age very well. The Kansas win actually has not aged as well as you might want, but you got to think that Bill Self will still, rattle off some wins and probably win a lot of games there in Lawrence. So 11-2, Matt, general impressions.
Did what they needed to do, like from 10,000 feet overhead. I think they got, all the bye game wins they needed. They mostly accomplished that with minimal angst. I think, people will probably look back and say the Eastern Washington game was probably a little more dodgy than it needed to be. The Jacksonville State game was dodgier than it needed to be. Lindenwood was bulky, but, I think when we look at game scores and Bart Torvik Missouri averaged, an 81 out of 100 in bye games per game scores, which is pretty much on par with what at-large teams from the SEC have put up in the past couple of years. So there's going to be, blowouts of, Pacific, of UAPB and Mississippi Valley State. And there's going to be, a couple of games where maybe you didn't quite have your best effort. Alabama State actually kind of landed right around 80. So Alabama State in some weird ways is kind of your median game in that kind of mix there. So they mostly do what they needed to do. They, in predictive metrics, those games didn't help or hurt them. They mostly stayed where they needed to. I think people, are going to be frustrated at kind of the lull and stagnation that led to a loss at Memphis. People are going to be happy, with the performance against Kansas to get a quad one win and to beat your arch rival. The Illinois game, I think, is a missed opportunity. But, Watkins did a verdict about it. You and I have talked about it a lot. We've written about it in different ways. That's just a game where, Missouri at the margins didn't execute the way they needed to, but you look at it, how they performed overall in that game. They were able to take away some things that Illinois really wanted to do. They were able to withstand a couple of runs. They took a lead. 4-minute execution down the stretch wasn't where it needed to be. But I think you leave non-con, feeling like, okay, we haven't really suffered a precipitous drop and, predictive metrics. We're looking okay in the net rankings. We've got a quad one win. The question now is, can we do what we need to do in conference play? And we have some questions about maybe the rotation and about how things are structured, but we can get into that if you want coming out of non-con. But Missouri won the games it needed to win. It got a quad one win. It, has mostly stayed level in the sort of, analytics and metric sites that we track, to give an indicator of its performance. And now it's really just down to how many wins can you dig out in a really, really, really deep SEC. That's, that's the last bit there. But I feel pretty good, about where they stand. They're right in the at-large conversation. That's where you want to be going into January. And now it's just about, can you, execute to the degree that's necessary to get in the field of 68. So it's a healthy place to be, and I still think there's room for this team to get better.
So one of the things that you had kind of mentioned was the Bart Torvik game score. And this is something that I've written about in the past and kind of talking about, ways to sort of measure game success. So basically, for anybody that's interested in this, like, you can go to barttorvik.com, you can click on the Missouri team page. And on the right column here, you can actually see the game scores. So if you're just listening to the podcast, barttorvik.com, click on Missouri, and at the schedule and results section of the page, you'll have the game scores. For those with us on YouTube, you can see the scores now. They basically awarded Missouri a game score of 100 for their game against Mississippi Valley State. Games in the 90s for Pacific and Arkansas Pine Bluff. 99 against Kansas. 63 is Jacksonville State. 55 was Cal. 69 Lindenwood. Eastern Washington was at 54. So, it's one of those situations where, you want to kind of average those out. Missouri averaged out looking pretty well. They won games where they didn't play well. And then they blew people out when they did. And really, like, that kind of included Kansas in that, because they had KU on the ropes big time when they were playing well, and then things got a little stagnant. And they kind of let them back in the game. So that's a really handy tool to sort of, did we play well, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do want to at least talk about Illinois a little bit. I know Watkins covered it in his verdict and kind of talked about some of the marginal things that Missouri didn't, quite do well enough. I thought it was a case of two teams that played pretty well. Neither team played their best game.
Nope.
The game score assigned to Mizzou was an 89. I think that might have been a little generous. I would have probably given them like a B minus level score. I think Illinois probably played something similar, but I do think those teams are a little closer. I think it's kind of thing going in, and we talked about this going in, that Missouri had the kind of roster and lineup that could give the Illini some trouble on the defensive end, and they did. Like they really forced Illinois to to play that the way that Missouri wanted them to. The downside is they just didn't quite execute at the free throw line. They didn't make enough threes. They didn't shoot enough threes. If you're a believer in what Watkins has been preaching, and so that's going to be a frustrating loss. But I think if you're Dennis Gates and you're this coaching staff, you come out of that game feeling pretty good. Like, you know that Illinois is a top 20 team. You know that they're a team that's probably going to contend for a Big Ten championship. And like, you just went toe to toe with them. You didn't play your best, and you had a chance to tie the game, on the final possession, and you missed your shot. So, I think, if again, that's doing a little bit of a zoom out and maybe, trying to sort of garner where your team's at, but I think you have to be pretty happy. But to kind of turn around and have like an uneven effort against Alabama State wasn't great. But I really feel like there are a lot of teams that played bad last week.
Yeah.
And played way worse than Missouri did. Alabama State's not a bad basketball team.
They'll be a SWAC contender. They'll be a contender in that league. They get an auto bid.
Yeah, they're pretty athletic. They can shoot the ball pretty well. And I think when you kind of look at the number of substitutions that Dennis Gates was making, it was clear that they were trying to kind of get Caleb Grill's, sea legs back up, underneath him a little bit. They're still trying to kind of, get run for Jacob Cruz to make sure that, he is as ready as he can be going in SEC play. And then you're also like really trying to kind of steal minutes for some freshmen who may not see a whole lot of minutes the rest of the way. So like you're really trying to kind of get T.O. Barrett some minutes. You're trying to get, Honor Batang saw some time in the first half. Guys who you're trying to kind of keep invested, and it seems to me like we have witnessed enough basketball at this point that the staff, as well as you and I and Matt Watkins, like we can watch all this and we can kind of see the top 5, 6, 7 guys that they need to be playing more.
Yeah.
And who needs to be kind of dialed back. And I almost kind of think that against Alabama State, there was this feeling of, this might be the last time we can really kind of go 12 deep. We're going to go 12 deep, even if it costs us, some continuity during the game.
Yeah. And I don't think you can ignore the fact that Anthony Robinson had a bug and missed that game. I think I wrote in the lineup performance piece afterwards, they gave 11 minutes to Marquez Warwick and T.O. Barrett at the point. Missouri was, basically -9. And, in those minutes they were, that's pretty much a difference. If you have, Ant Robinson available, you're probably not taking that hit by having a secondary creator or a freshman run the point for 10 minutes during that game. I think it was very, very obvious too that they were, like I said, trying to give run to some guys and see if they could give them some last looks, see if they can, get one final kind of snippet of the freshmen. And, that included, putting Marcus Allen out there, who we really, really liked. But there were some lineups where, you wind up with him and Cruz and, Aiden Shaw together, and you just didn't have enough offensive juice. And that was before you considered, Ant Robinson wasn't there. So it was just a night where I felt like defensively, they did a pretty good job. The metrics, support, they were pretty solid on defense, until garbage time. They got a little, they had, for the first time really all non-con, they had seepage, in garbage time, but they were pretty good defensively most of the night. I just felt like there were some stretches where, in trying to give guys some looks and in trying to, see how some guys might close non-con, they just wound up with some lineups where they just didn't quite have the offensive scoring pop they would normally have. And that happens. And, as we've said a couple of times, on the main site, on the boards at Rockin' Plus, and, on this pod, this staff is still going to treat some of these games a little bit like the crash lab. Once they get a pretty safe lead, they're going to start tinkering and start throwing some things up against the wall. And that's really what happened down the stretch. So we would like to see them, maybe stop that, once December gets here and start focusing a little bit, start narrowing down. I think that's something I kind of wrote about on the forums a little bit when I looked at the lineups here. I'm still not sure they really have. I think they know kind of their top 5 to 6 guys that you mentioned, but I think between like 6 and 11, it's still really fluid. And I don't know if they quite have a sense at this point, what are the 5 to 10 lineups that we know we can bank on. The most used lineup at this point is the starting lineup that they rolled out against Kansas and hadn't used ever since. The next most used lineup, the number 2 most used lineup, was the starting lineup they used during bye games.
Well, I was going to point out that starting lineup, like we had not seen that starting lineup before Kansas, and now it's the number 1 lineup.
Right. So what that should tell you is that, if you go look at a lot of other teams, whether you believe in looking at Ken Palm or Evan Meyer, and you look at their top lineups, most teams pretty quickly by this time of year settle in their top 10 to 15 groups. So they have a really good sense of how everything's going to be structured. They're going to see a team on Saturday in Auburn that very, very, very clearly has a hierarchy in terms of how guys are used, in terms of how Bruce manages his rotation. Missouri's is a little bit murky at this point. So I think that's the one thing you come out of non-con wondering about is, okay, we've seen this team play well in spurts. We've seen its potential. That potential has been good enough to beat Kansas. But is there a cohesive idea about how this team wants to structure its rotation, structure its lineup, and then, roll into non-con with that? I think that's still sort of an open question. And that's, to me, the one thing that you came out of Alabama State maybe wanting to see was Dennis go, okay, in the first half, we're just going to roll our best groups through. We're going to get these guys taken care of. We may start the second half with our starters and our first couple subgroups, and then we'll get loose with it. But they got a little bit wonky and creative in the first half, and to me, it just would have been nice for them to come out and say, last real rehearsal before the real games get here, didn't quite get that. So I think we've seen their potential. They mostly handled their business in non-con, but I can't sit here on January 2 and really tell you these are the top 5 to 10 lineups. These are the clear roles guys have. And we'll see if that's a good thing or a bad thing, over the next couple of weeks. But if you're looking for some certainty or some clarity in terms of how this team is structured in terms of what roles are, that's still a little elusive right now. And that might be a good or a bad thing. I can't say at this point.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of, like you mentioned, having the kind of like last dress rehearsal and how that's going to, whether or not it's going to be a good or a bad thing, we're going to find out in a hurry. Because like the most difficult game in the eyes of the NCAA's net ranking is at Auburn. There are 9 teams that are going to get to travel to Auburn and play them. I mean, we don't know necessarily that Auburn is going to finish the year number 1 on the net, but they certainly are there right now, and they are they have a significant enough lead to make you think that, okay, like they might be able to withstand this. If Auburn goes, 15-3 or 16-2, they're almost certain to be there.
14-4 getting the depth too.
14-4, they might still be there. There's 9 teams that are going to have an opportunity to beat Auburn at Auburn, to capture the best possible win you can get in the eyes of the net. And Missouri is the first one to try.
Yay!
Yay! So we've had like plenty of kind of discussion about this online, but not necessarily on the podcast. And it is interesting. I realize there's, it's one thing for us, especially when you're looking at the analytics and you're looking at the fact that, this is projected to be a 15 to 23 point game, depending on what service you believe in. And I'm guessing at some point we'll see a line on the game. That line will probably be north of 15 points.
Probably around 19, I would guess.
You're going to guess 19?
Yeah.
Well, I know like Ken Palm's got it at 19 or 20. And I know that, I think there's one of the other analytics sites that had it at 23.
I look at it for a game as of right now. Ken Palm has it at Auburn as an 18-point favorite. Torvik has Auburn as a 19-point favorite. Haslametrics has them as a 19.1 point favorite. Evan Maya has them as a 20.8 favorite. That means the average line right now from predictive sites is 19.2 points. Basically, they're forecasting an 89-70 Auburn win at this juncture. That's the benchmark. Auburn coming close to putting 90 on you.
Well, yeah, I'd like to forecast. So for people that are like, we're saying Auburn's number one in the analytics. So I'm just looking at the main Ken Palm page right now. Their net rating is 36.36.
It's a huge gap. Number 2.
Duke is number 2 at 32.72. Auburn has a 13-point lead over the 10th ranked. Really, Michigan is 10.
Yeah,
but 13 points better per 100 possessions than the 10th
massive gap.
Michigan. Like that is a big gap to go from 1 to 10.
Huge.
I was gonna look at so that this is basically like UConn last year finished at 36.43. They finished 5 points ahead of Houston. Like 36, a net rating of 36 is massive. Gonzaga of the COVID year,
it's huge.
I'm just going back trying to find any like 36.91 Kentucky from 2015. That was their 38-1 team that lost in the national semifinals. So there's a reason why the predictive metrics are not super high on Missouri's chances. It's because Auburn has been playing at a level so far this year that few teams are able to play at and maintain. They're the number one offensive team. Their offensive rating is 130.6. Their defensive rating, they're 13th at 94.3. So they're top 15 defense, number one offense. They're playing better than anybody. Their only loss is to number 2 Duke on Duke's home floor, and that game was close.
Yeah.
So and what's funny is before the season, I think did we have Auburn 5th?
We had them second.
Did we have them second?
Yep.
It was last year that we had kind of dropped them, and we're like, not doing that again after they. I don't know. Wasn't sure about their guards a couple years ago, and sure enough, guards were fine. Man, they're playing really well. Janai Broome has been the best player in the country.
Yeah.
Not only are they they're playing a really difficult schedule. They lost to number 2. They beat number 3, number 5. They also beat number 29, number 34.
And they beat the brakes off
27.
Ohio State and Purdue too. Just absolutely. They hammered number 28 Ohio State by, what is that, 38?
Well, and they also there are no Mississippi Valley States on this schedule. No. They played Georgia State. They beat Georgia State, who's 307. They beat them 40. Yeah. Everybody else is in the 100 to 200 range for their non-marquee games. But yeah, they played Houston, Iowa State, North Carolina, Memphis, Ohio State, and Purdue, and won all those games.
So their schedule's going to age well. It's going to take the wheels falling off for them probably to finish outside the top 5 or top 6 in Ken Palm this year. We knew Junai Broom was going to be the vital piece for them coming into the year. I think we expected his usage rate to be pretty high. It's around 30% right now. That hasn't shocked us at all. I think the questions we had coming into the year was just how much more headroom did their backcourt have to get better? Like, Chad Baker-Mazara looked good coming down the stretch. Looked really, really good. Was an All-SEC tournament player. Jay Johnson started to figure things out down the stretch, and that's not a surprise. Jay Johnson and Chad Baker-Mazara were basically like 2 D2-ish to JUCO level guys, and we know it takes them basically a year to get settled, and you started to see that down the stretch, and it was like, okay, was that a flurry or was that going to be a jumping off point for them? You didn't know until you got into this season. Denver Jones was a guy who had been an extremely high usage player at FIU. And the question was, okay, was he going to be comfortable staying kind of that role player, type of archetype for them? And he has been. He's been fantastic, sort of. He starts nominally, but he kind of flexes around at the point guard and the combo guard spot. He's been really, really good sort of buying in to a role that's chopped his touches in half over the last 2 years. And that's something that, Bruce is really, really good at, is getting mid-major guys who are absolute, who are absolutely having to work at high, volume to take a haircut. He's really, really good at getting guys to buy into that mentality. But still, you looked at it and you said, okay, where can these guys go? And all of them have improved. Chad Baker-Mazara is still shooting 37% from deep, but he's gotten better playing off the bounce and found some, ways to make plays as a rim finisher. Chaney Johnson, I would not want him shooting the basketball ever, but that guy was a star at a D2 program, was averaging close to 20 points a game. All that dude does now is just cut you to pieces as a screener, cutter, roller. He's absolutely bought into almost never getting an on-ball touch, but still scoring 10 points a game just by being really active and moving within their offense. Denver Jones, I just mentioned it. He's shooting 47% from 3. 47%. They has also found a way to up his efficiency at the foul line. Those 3 guys got better. And, it's going to be terrifying for Missouri to have to go face that on Saturday, but there's part of me that is heartened by that, because how often do we spend the offseason talking about, who's retrofitted their roster, who's overhauled everything, how have these guys done completely turning things over? Bruce Pearl did something that you and I think respect. He stuck with his guys. He relied on continuity. He relied on player development. Auburn is 36th in minutes continuity this year. They brought their guys back, and they said, we're going to bet on you. We're going to get you in the gym. We're going to get you better, and we're going to see if we can turn you into a team that has one more level. And they've done that so far. And even, the transfer portal pickups, we were sort of skeptical, like, is it really smart to push out Trey Donaldson? Is it smart to push out Aiden Holloway? Miles Kelly's been really, really good coming in. He's basically given up any tough midi that he took at Georgia Tech and is now fine being a secondary ball handler to initiate stuff and then just shoot threes. And Tahad Pettiford is the archetypal kind of jittery small point guard that Bruce has just built teams around. Like, he didn't go into the portal and like bring in 10 new guys. He went in and got 3 guys. I mean, I noted this today when I was kind of doing an early look ahead at them. He went out and got JP Pegues, one of the best point guards in the portal, one of the best shooting point guards off the bounce. And he has basically shelled him since December 1, so it's a hot Pettiford, a freshman, can play more.
Yeah.
That's ballsy as hell. Like, we talk about coaches, we talk about, does Dennis need to have some focus and maybe chop the rotation down? How many coaches are going to go out and get an all kind of like SoCon point guard, a guy that a lot of high major programs wanted, and then basically decide after 8 games, nah, I'm going to ride with the Frush? That takes guts. It takes some chutzpah. So I respect the fact that Bruce stuck with his guys. They put in sweat equity to get better. But when he's had to make tough calls, he hasn't hesitated so far. So they're playing at a high level. They've got guys that are bought into that program, that know the system, that have continuity together, and that have, seen the coaching staff invest in their development. And this is what can happen, when everything goes right. They've absolutely built a juggernaut that's beating the brakes off really, really good teams early on.
Yeah, they finished 4th in KenPom last year. And obviously I had the upset loss in the first round to Yale. And that is something that, especially when you're kind of bringing back that kind of continuity, can really light a fire. And probably fueled like a lot of their off-season workouts. So yeah, it's a very tall task for Missouri to go in there and to try to stifle this offense that just they score the ball. Yeah, like they score the ball well. They share the ball, they shoot the ball well. There aren't a lot of things that they don't do. One thing that they will do though, they will foul you.
Yeah.
And Missouri, at least this version of the Tigers, does like to make lots of trips to the foul line. If there is going to be like a big key, like Mizzou being able to attack the rim, make tough twos, but also get to the foul line. Because when you're at the foul line, you're able to quiet the crowd a bit. Now, they'll get loud trying to get you to miss, but it's, the energy of that building can feed on itself in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Especially with the way Auburn plays. And I mean, we've watched it over the years, like once they kind of get going on a run, it could really put a team away. Missouri has not had a lot of success there. Even good Missouri teams have not had a lot of success there. So it'll be important for this team. They're going to have to knock down some threes, but they're really going to have to be good at the rim. And Auburn's a team that is difficult to be good at the rim on.
I think that was sort of the thing that struck me. Like Auburn still picks you up probably 3/4 court. They still token press. They still get into you. So like I think when you watch them play, it still feels like they're turnover heavy. Like they're still trying to get you turned over and sped up. But they've made another thing that I should credit Bruce for was he's basically said, we're fine if that pressure just results in tough shots. They flipped the script. They're one of the best defensive rebounding teams in the country, and they've basically chopped their turnover rate in half, or by about a third, I think. So they are not turning teams over as much, but that length, that athleticism still makes life an absolute slog once you get inside the arc. They are still, I think I'm looking at it right now, they are still 10th in the country in block rate. They are 16th in the country in rim defense. And their transition game hits you on secondary breaks. So they will grab, go, and push. Live ball turnovers have fallen off a little bit, but they absolutely sell out. They can stop you at the rim. They can grab, and they can get out and push. So if you're Missouri, you've got to be able to find a way to shoot above 50% at the rim here. Teams that have managed to at least hang in there with Auburn have cleared 50% at the rim. You've got to get half your rim makes down. You don't have to shoot a high volume of threes, but you've got to shoot a decent clip. I think I looked at it today. Teams that have hung around with them have shot north of 37%. So you've got to go 50-50 at the rim. You've probably got to get 6 to 7 3 balls to drop. It doesn't have to be high volume because Mizzou's probably going to sell out to drive it. That's what they've done against high majors. And you've got to hope that you can put fouls on them, like you were saying. You've got to be able to put fouls on these guys. I think the game that, if I were looking for a blueprint, would be Iowa State. Iowa State, really, really made a concerted effort. When they got rebounds, they pushed. They were looking to hit on secondary breaks. They were looking to play over the top against Auburn's token pressure. They wanted to break it and get to the backside and really attack the rim. They built their lineups, to have two bigs that were really just focused on taking rim attacks to Broom, taking rim attacks to Chady Johnson, taking to Dylan Cardwell. They wanted to put fouls on them. I think Iowa State's free throw rate was like 51%. That's absurdly high. But their mantra was, we're not going to back up. We're going to attack pressure. We're going to get downhill. We're going to make your guys have to make plays around the rim, and we're going to try to put fouls on you. Now, that worked for 18 minutes, and then Auburn woke up and got them in the second half. But I don't think this is a game where, if you're Missouri, you can shrink and back up. I think you've got to play downhill, and you've got to be able to find a way to make just enough threes to keep the creases and gaps open. But this seems like a game where I think Missouri is going to want to try and take the fight to them. And to your point earlier about how things have gone badly for Missouri there, this is probably the first roster in the last 5, 6, 7 years where you can look at it and go, Missouri's got the athletes. They've got the kind of body types, the kind of length, the kind of athleticism to where they can match up with Auburn. So if you're going to play, don't try and just space out. Don't try and bomb away. You've got the bodies to match them at some positions. Attack them. Go play aggressively and see what happens. Now, if it goes poorly, you might get run out of the gym by 30, but you'd rather be aggressive and rather attack. Let's see if you can't, put Auburn in a bind where they've got to reach down their bench and, ask some guys to do more than they can. So it'll be interesting to see just what Missouri's mentality is offensively. And do they do what they've done against sort of Cal in the second half and against Illinois and against Kansas, which was, we're not going to back up. We're going to play downhill. We're going to try and get in your face. We're going to try and make this an at-rim type of game. And who can win that? So that my hope is that they'll maybe repeat that again with just a little bit more shooting. A little bit more shooting.
And I do like your point that, it feels like this is the first roster that Missouri has had that can compete with the athleticism of Auburn. It really feels like there's been games where, even though the score was closer, and I'm almost thinking, trying to think.
The slog in Conzo's last year in Columbia, they kept that game pretty close.
No, that was, I was thinking of games at Auburn Arena. And I was trying to think of, I think it was like the first half, maybe a 2019. Yeah, I think that's what it was. The first half of 2019, where they went down there and just played a really sound, like solid first half, and then Auburn just blew their doors off in the second half. And it was just like, but it was a game where you knew going in, like, you were going to have to shorten the game, and you were going to have to, get a couple lucky possessions and and use whatever you could use to try to play into that. And that is not this Missouri team. Like, it's like, this isn't a Konzo Martin roster. This isn't a Commanderson roster. This is a roster that has a lot of guys who are big, long, and athletic, and in some ways, like, maybe even bigger and more athletic than Auburn is. At least in some positions. Like Anthony Robinson and Tony Perkins are going to be bigger than Auburn. Auburn's guards, and I think Denver Jones is probably so. I think he's 6'4". Yeah,
6'3", 6'4".
he and Tony are pretty similar in size. But this isn't a game where you're just going to be completely overwhelmed by their athleticism. This is a game where like you should be able to. The environment is always going to be tough, but you should be able to be competitive with them and be competitive with them at the rim. Jedi Broom is a great shot blocker. Like he has uncanny timing for a defensive player, but you've got enough athleticism that I feel like you should be able to challenge him at least a little bit. And if you can get into his chest with, like I think Mark Mitchell can, jump up high enough to, get into his chest and try to get a couple finishes and maybe put a couple fouls on him. And I think that can go a long way.
Yeah. You basically traded Noah Carter as your 4 for Mark Mitchell. Your 5, can be Josh Gray to lean on Dylan Cardwell, because that's what Josh Gray did last year. He leaned on Dylan Cardwell. You've got shooters now out on the wing, who, you've got Trent Pierce. If you need a long athletic body to track Chad Baker-Mazara, you've got Trent Pierce you could throw out there for extra length at that position. You've got a guy who, when he's really engaged in Tamar Bates, can be a 3-level scorer who can go get you a basket. That's what you need in these types of games. You've got size and assertiveness at the point. The real question here is, can you execute consistently? And, is there enough quality and consistency up and down your rotation to give that to you? But I think that's the heartening thing here, is to look at this and go, okay, the rosters here are not going to have 2 undersized point guards. Tamar Bates having to do some stuff on the wing against a bigger defender and Baker-Mazara. In your front court is not going to be Connor Vanover, Noah Carter, and Jordan Butler. Like, athletically, that gap should be closer. Now, the execution thing, we're going to keep harping on that, is the linchpin. That sounds obvious too. But you're not going to look at these two teams and go, well, the getting off the bus test is one that Auburn wins decisively. These two teams are going to kind of look similar, which is, halfway heartening to maybe that Missouri can find a way to compete in that sense. So we'll see what they do, but it's going to be interesting to see kind of what this team does going into that environment, and can they sort of stifle that forward that fills in. So we'll see.
Yeah. It's a tall task to ask anybody in the country to go into Auburn Arena and get a win. There is nobody who would be favored in this game. So, yeah, like my expectations are that they go in there and they compete and they see what happens. I don't think, like I said, I don't think Auburn is infallible. I think they're a great basketball team. This is college basketball. Weird things happen. There's no reason for this Missouri basketball team to be intimidated by any team in any environment. They've got experience, they've got athleticism, they've got talent. When they have everything kind of working, they look like a top 25 level team. This is a team that they should. For me, the only thing that'll be disappointing is if they go in there and they lose the plot. Like, just don't like. I want to see them compete. I think they can. Yeah. I will be happy if they go in there, they compete, and they lose. Yeah, but I've seen games in Auburn Arena where things get away from teams, and you see that sort of letdown. Don't have a letdown. Like this is the opportunity to really show a lot of people like what your squad is made of, and so they're gonna punch you hard. You just got to be ready to punch back. Maybe not. There's no
good time to play this game. There's no good time to play this game. Like, is Auburn going to be any less challenging on January 4 versus February 4 versus March 4? Like, when's a good time? When's a good time for this to happen? And in a weird way, I sort of looked at it over the summer and said, oh man, that's, long layoff, not leaving the state, and you got to go open at Auburn. And then it's like, well, I think a couple of weeks ago, my mentality just sort of shifted to, it's got to get done at some point. There's no optimal time to face a team that's playing the way Auburn is. Get it done early, get it out of the way. Maybe you catch them, coming out of a lull, out of the holiday break. Maybe you guys are engaged. Missouri's at a good point, health wise. Everyone's healthy, everyone's available. Maybe you catch them early. Maybe there's an opportunity here to capitalize on them just trying to get, settled in a non-con play. I'm highly skeptical that happens, but you got to go play this game. The challenge is going to be the same no matter if it's today or 2 months from now. Missouri's got to do that, and the things Missouri would have to do are the exact same. So just go do it, execute. And I would rather them go in looking to be aggressive, looking to get a win. And if that gets them blown out by 20 or 25, but they went in looking to win rather than just do margin control, I can live with that. I think I would be more annoyed if it was very clear that they were coming there looking to keep it to a 12 or 11 or 12 point win. Go in there to win. Go win. And, if it gets sideways, but at least it was out of an effort to try and get a result, I can at least live with that.
So the good news coming out of Auburn is as easy as the SEC schedule gets, which is not easy, it gets for Missouri. So our good friend Blake Lovell tweeted this out. Or they're not called tweets anymore. I don't know. I think Elno just wants them to be called posts, whatever. The Blake Lovell on the X.com. 16 college basketball teams, the toughest remaining schedule, strength schedule. This is all per ESPN BPI. They are all in the SEC. However, number one is South Carolina, probably because they're the worst team. Missouri is 15th. And considering that Missouri right now in all these analytic rankings, they're anywhere between kind of like 13th and 14th. I know you have them all in your head, but Missouri seems to be kind of in that bottom four of teams in like the analytic rankings. So for them to not be higher is surprising because you can't play yourself. So what that means is Missouri is playing a lot of games against the bottom half of the conference.
I think I looked at it here. They have 1, 2, 3, just 4 games against KenPom top 10 teams, which is really realistically the top 4 or 5 are inside that range right now. If you believe the top 5 goes all the way to A&M, they have them 1, so 5, maybe. And they go to Mississippi State. So just a third of their games are probably against teams that are probably going to be in the top 5 or 6. Yeah, 6 in the league. So it's not bad. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me about their schedule is sometimes the schedule makers might give you a pretty good slate in terms of like composition, but just the structure of it is really bad. So you will not have, you might get some favorable home and homes and you might avoid some bad road trips, but all your tough games are stacked in like a 3 or 4 game run. And that can just nuke you. That can absolutely nuke you. And Missouri,
it's kind of like the old, like Eric Musselman Arkansas teams when like they would start out and be like 1-5. And it's like, well, their schedule is brutal. And then they get the soft part of the schedule. I'm like, oh, they're on this hot run. It's like, well, that's how it happens.
Right. Now the SEC is a bear, so this is all relative here. You go to Auburn, that's not pleasant, but then you go home and you get LSU, which LSU's at 56 in KenPom right now, but I can tell you from all summer and the preseason ratings on through, that's been a projected win for Missouri. The margin has shrank, but that's always been a projected win at home. Same for Vandy. The trip to Florida has always been a projected loss. The game against Arkansas coming in has always been a projected win. And the trip to Texas has always been a projected loss. So, like, the start to this, even though the SEC's compacted together, the forecast for Missouri's opening 5-6 games has not changed. So, relatively speaking here, like, there's nothing that I look at based on how the SEC is performing and go, oh man, the schedule got way harder than we thought out of the chute. It's been the same since it's been set up for maybe a 3-3 start, maybe 4-2, if you can steal a road game. So that's your objective here. Going looking to win at Auburn, but I think we understand that's a pretty tall task. You get LSU at home. That's a game you have to hold serve. You get Vanderbilt at home. That's a game you have to hold serve. Florida, probably more challenging than we expected in the preseason. I thought that might be a pickup opportunity. Less so now. But if you look at Arkansas and Texas,
Florida's played really well. They also they haven't really played anybody. Like if you're gonna like now, we're gonna find out about Florida in a hurry because they've got to open the season. Kentucky on the road, home against Tennessee. They go to Arkansas, and then they welcome Missouri. So we're gonna find out really quickly if Arkansas is really, or not Arkansas, if Florida is really a top. I mean, they're currently 6th in KenPom, which is surprising to me. But they've done really well with the schedule that they have.
But their best
we've all watched North Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina. Like, we've watched North Carolina. They're not like a traditional North Carolina team. And even that game, like, they had to hold them off. They were up big early,
yeah.
and then this is like Carolina's MO. I don't know if anybody's watched North Carolina. North Carolina plays like trash in the first half, and they have a big second half comeback.
Yeah.
And they did that against Florida. So,
but I look at Arkansas and Texas. Those are two of the teams. I look at this stuff and I track it. They are two of the biggest droppers in KenPom's ratings since the season started. I think Texas is down 15 and 20 spots, same for Arkansas. Those two teams have also biffed quality win opportunities. I think Arkansas got one when they rallied against Michigan, but they've sort of drifted back to the pack and have not looked really convincing in quad 1 level games, particularly Texas. So Arkansas comes in, you feel like that's a game you can pick up at home. You're looking at 3-2. And I look at that Texas game as kind of a linchpin game for me. If you can go on the road and you can steal a road win at Texas, you're at 4-2 out of the gate. You come home to get Ole Miss, which is a game that is a projected toss-up. If you can get that Arkansas, Texas, Ole Miss section, to me is sort of where you can really help and kind of shift the narrative around what your season is. If you open at 5-2 and, it makes those road trips to Mississippi State and Tennessee look a little bit more tolerable, then you come home and you get a pretty good stretch. So to me, that's the real kind of indicator there is, can you do what you need to do against LSU and Vandy, and then can you make hay against Arkansas, Texas, and Ole Miss? Can you get 2 wins out of that group? And if you get 3 and you're at 5-2, plus the win you have over Kansas, you're probably already at 4 to 5 quad 1 wins. You probably only have to find 4 wins the rest of the way. You're in really, really prime position. So to me, late January is where I think you're going to be able to start saying, okay, we feel like this team is going to be priming itself for a really, really solid tournament seed, potentially. It's a pretty workable stretch for them. And I don't think it's all that bad, but that starts with handling LSU when they come in next week. LSU's kind of in the same position, but they didn't play very well against they got a lot of plaudits for going into Manhattan and getting a win at Kansas State. And Kansas State has fallen off the cliff despite spending $2 million on Coleman Hawkins. They needed 3 overtimes to get by a middling UCF team. They beat Florida State, which is kind of regressed a little bit over non-con. They lost at SMU in a semi-away game in like Fort Worth. Their best win is probably UCF on a neutral court in rural West Virginia. Their overall non-conference schedule is number 335. You could make the same critique about Missouri, that Missouri hasn't really played strong non-con either, but you look at LSU, and it's a team that right now just hasn't kind of given you a quality performance against a team like Kansas.
Yeah.
They haven't looked the same against a team like Illinois or even a team against Memphis. And I think that's the difference there. It feels like Missouri in their quad one games has looked like they've had a little bit higher potential. Also, LSU is tiny. They are, I think, 174th in average height. Their front court is 6'9", 6'8", 6'5". This is a game with a smaller team. Jordan Sears, Jacob Cruz's old teammate and running mate at UT Martin, is their starting point guard at 5'11". You feel like Missouri's got more depth. They've got more size. It's at home. You feel like you've seen Missouri play better against higher caliber competition, and both teams have been equal against by-game competition. That's a game where if you're Missouri and you want to be an NCAA tournament team, you got to hold serve at home, particularly this year in league play. So if Missouri is competitive, Auburn does what it needs to against LSU, awesome. Just get to the point where you can maybe make some hay in late January and see if you can get a run going.
Yeah. So that's the setup. So they've got a tall task this weekend, but LSU Vanderbilt next week, both at home. You better, and we didn't really talk about Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt scores the ball well. Defense has not been great. They're smaller. That's a team that you should be able to beat at home. So I don't fully know what our recording schedule is going to be kind of coming up, since we're recording late in this week, but we are going to get back into a weekly thing here soon. So we'll just kind of figure that out as we go. I think that's it.
Yeah. Much different discussion than we had this time a year ago, where injury luck was decidedly bad, and they had fallen into the 90s of net. So, no guarantees. We'll see what, the next 18 games are going to bring. It's going to be a bear, but you can at least start non-con legitimately saying Missouri can position itself for an NCAA tournament bid, which, coming off a bagel of a conference season last year, is certainly improvement and certainly welcome.
Yeah. And, why not get your first conference win of the year in the best possible way by beating Auburn? That would be sending an opening shot to the rest of the league that you're not messing around. So we'll be back soon. Maybe later in the week next week. Otherwise, might go back to Mondays. I don't know yet. We're going to figure that out. Matt and I are going to figure that out. Regardless, you've also got episodes. Well, if you're a Rockin' Plus subscriber, if you're not, you should subscribe to Rockin' Plus, because you get episodes of The Verdict. And who doesn't love The Verdict, Matt? Matt Watkins watching film, breaking it down, explaining all the things that happen. It doesn't say, I'm not making it sound super thrilling. It is a really interesting podcast. I really need to work on my sales pitches better.
It's a peek into our addled brains to watch Watkins do this, and you want some sense of how we watch basketball, which is, it should be for fun, entertainment, and relaxation. It really isn't. In some ways, you want to see how neurotic we are in watching this stuff. Look up The Verdict and see how broken we are mentally in terms of watching hoops.
Yeah,
there's my pitch.
We've got a new subscriptions set up at the site, so you can manage all your account right on Rockin' Plus. I'm pretty excited about that. I rolled that out last week. And super easy to sign up, super easy to pause. You can pause your subscription now. Or you can just you can cancel, and then you can just sign up again. Like it's all super easy to do, which is one of the things I was like really, really trying to accomplish with the site is just, I want it to be easy to use. It's easier to use now. And the forums, I love the forums. Like, they're beautiful. They work well. There's like a GIF thing now. It's all great. So yeah, sign up, join us in the forums. Lots of good talk going on. And we'll be back to talk about all the stuff that's about to happen in Mizzou basketball here soon. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you everyone for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and the benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.